The marble building was the tallest thing on the street, and the street itself was the strangest Harry Potter had ever walked down. Gringotts rose above Diagon Alley like a white cliff, and inside it smelled of stone and lamp oil and something older, not quite cold, not quite damp, just the smell of age and deep earth and very old money. The goblins behind the long counter did not look up. Harry tried very hard not to stare at them and stared anyway. "Your birthday," Hagrid said beside him. Not quite a question. Harry's birthday was today, the 31st of July, 1891, and he was turning 11, and his life had cracked open 3 days ago when a giant had knocked down the door of a shack in the middle of the sea and told him he was a wizard. He hadn't had time yet to decide how he felt about any of it. He was still catching up. Griphook, that was the goblin's name, sharp-faced and clever-eyed, led them past the long counter and through a door at the back, and then they were climbing into a small cart on a track that ran into the darkness ahead. Harry grabbed the side on instinct. It didn't look sturdy. It looked like something built by something that found the concept of falling very funny. "Hold on," Griphook said, and then the cart took off. It went fast, faster than that even, in that stomach-leaving way that makes your mouth open before you decide to let it. The tunnels blurred by. Harry's eyes watered. He clung to the side with both hands, and when he looked at Hagrid and found him grinning like a man who did this for fun, he felt obscurely better. The air smelled of iron and something mineral and deep. He had no wand. He'd known this already. Hagrid had explained the sequence. The bank first, then supplies, then the wand. So he had nothing useful, and was very far underground and hurtling through the dark in a cart that a goblin was steering by doing nothing visible. This was fine. He was a wizard. Probably this was normal. The cart slowed at a vault door set into living rock. Hagrid produced a small gold key, kept for Harry by someone named Dumbledore, whoever that was, and turned it in the lock, and the door swung open. What was inside was gold. Harry blinked. He'd been told there was money in his vault, but the word money had not prepared him for this. The gleaming stacks of coins, the high, soft glow of them, the sheer quantity, more than he could put a number to. Galleons, Hagrid explained. Gold. Sickles. Silver. Nuts. The little bronze ones. He said it matter of fact, and there was something in his voice that Harry didn't quite hear yet. Harry looked at the coins. His parents had put this here. James Potter, who had died when Harry was a year old. Lily Potter, who had stood between Harry and a curse and been killed for it. He didn't feel anything about this as a specific thought. He just felt it as a weight in his chest that he hadn't expected when he walked in. He took a handful of coins and stuffed them in his pocket. He didn't say anything. Hagrid didn't say anything either. They reboarded the cart. They went deeper. The tunnels narrowed as they descended, the stone changing, less finished, less lit. The cart curved along the track, and Griphook sat with the stillness of something that had no need to do anything to be dangerous. The lamplight grew more intermittent, the shadows between each lamp longer. At some point, Harry noticed it was getting darker. Not black, not yet. Just darker. And then there was the sound of water. He heard it before he saw it. A rushing sound ahead, growing louder as they rounded a long curve, and then the lamplight caught it. A cascade, a waterfall, falling across the passage from somewhere above the tracks, all the way down to the stone floor, wall to wall. There was no way around it. The track went straight through. Harry thought, that looks unusual. He didn't have time to think anything else before the cart drove into it. The cold hit him first, then the sound, then the sensation of something wrong. Not wrong like pain, but wrong like a note played flat, like a hand reaching for something that wasn't there. The waterfall roared, and the cart shuddered and tilted, and the world went sideways. And then there was the floor, which was stone, which was hard, and Harry was on it. He lay still. He was wet. His glasses were on somehow. His hands were on stone. Somewhere in the dark, Hagrid was saying something. He sat up, and then he felt it, or felt the absence of it, which was the same thing. A presence that had been wrapped around him so long and so quietly that he had never once known it was there. It left the way warmth leaves a room. Not all at once, not with drama, just gone. And the air where it had been was only air. He couldn't have named what it was, or described its shape, or said what it had been doing, or how long it had sat over him like a second skin. He only knew that it was gone, and that the goneness of it was the most precisely calibrated emptiness he had ever felt, like a room stripped bare. He pressed his hands flat to the cold stone and sat there, dripping in the dark. A few feet away, a pink umbrella had skidded against the tunnel wall. Hagrid found it by feel before he found Harry. His hands swept the stone floor in the dark, and the umbrella handle was the first familiar thing he touched, and he gripped it and didn't let go. The weight of it settled something, not much, but something. He was dazed. He was soaked. He was fine, which was the advantage of being Hagrid. Things that would have put another person flat for a week tended to only put him sideways. He steadied himself on one knee, then got upright, and then he found Harry, found him by the faint sound of breathing, and crouched down beside him. "Are you hurt? Are you all right?" The boy said he was fine. Hagrid looked at him the way you look at someone when you're not sure. Fine is the whole truth. The waterfall shouldn't have done that. Hagrid didn't know what it had done exactly, but it shouldn't have done it. He could feel it the way you feel when a fire goes out in a room. Not the fire, not the cold, just the particular texture of absence where something used to be. He was going to have to tell Dumbledore. He was already not looking forward to that conversation. But first, the parcel. He still had to get the parcel. He straightened up. He turned to Griphook, who had righted himself with the economy of someone for whom dignity is not a thing that can be taken by gravity. Griphook was watching the waterfall, which still fell behind them, indifferent and white. "The thief's downfall," Griphook said. He said it the way you say the name of something that is exactly where it is supposed to be, doing exactly what it is supposed to do. Hagrid's voice came out steadier than he felt. "I need to complete the second vault." Griphook looked at him for a long moment. Then he turned without a word and began walking down the track on foot. The cart was off the rails. They left it. The walk was long and cold and silent, and Harry walked between Hagrid and the wall because the darkness on the other side was very complete. He could hear Hagrid breathing. He could hear his own wet clothes. He tried once to find words for what had happened. Not the crash, which he understood, but the other thing, the absence, and couldn't, so he stopped trying and just walked. Vault 713 was a door set deeper in the rock than anything they'd passed. Griphook stroked the surface of it. No key, no lock, just a single deliberate motion. And it swung open. Inside was very little, a small package wrapped in brown paper, sitting on a shelf as if it had been waiting some time. Hagrid picked it up. He tucked it into his coat with a care that was out of proportion to its size, and then he looked at Harry with an expression that said a number of things he had no intention of saying aloud. He cleared his throat. "Right then," he said. "Let's go up." Somewhere in the tunnels, further back, further up. Quirinus Quirrell stood very still in the dark. He had come for the vault. He had known it would be sealed. He had come anyway, because the other one did not take no for an answer. Something had shifted a few minutes ago. Not the vault, not the stone. Something in the quality of the magic down here, subtle as a pressure drop before a storm. The voice at the back of his head had gone very quiet. Then it spoke, in a tone Quirrell had never heard from it before. Not contempt, not cold amusement, not the usual hunger. "The boy is here." A pause. Something about the boy has changed. Quirrell pressed himself against the wall. His hands were shaking, which they often were, but not usually for this reason. The voice did not speak again. It was thinking. He had learned by now to be afraid when it was thinking. He waited in the dark, listening to the distant sound of water, and did not move. They emerged from Gringotts into the bright afternoon, and Diagon Alley was too much and exactly right. Colour where Privet Drive had only beige. Sound. Shouting somewhere. Laughter. The clatter of something dropped behind a window. The smell of coffee from the leaky cauldron, and parchment, and something sweet that Harry couldn't identify. He turned in a slow circle until Hagrid's hand appeared briefly on his shoulder and redirected him. Harry let himself be redirected. Under the alley's noise and brightness, untouched by it, the lightness from the waterfall sat precisely where it had been since the tunnels. They bought a cauldron first. Pewter, size 2, standard for first years, Hagrid explained. Then robes at a shop called Madame Malkin's, where a squat, pleasant witch in mauve measured Harry's arms and inseam with a tape measure that moved on its own, which Harry watched with great attention. Then books from Flourish and Blots, where the upper shelves occasionally rearranged themselves, and which smelled of old paper and something faintly smoky and good. Harry didn't have enough eyes for any of it. He kept half of them on Hagrid, who moved through the alley the way someone moves through a place they know well. Comfortable, unhurried, nodding at shopkeepers, carrying more of the bags than was strictly reasonable. Somewhere between the robes and the books, Harry asked, "Hagrid, that waterfall, in the tunnels." Hagrid said. "What was it?" Hagrid was quiet for a moment. His vast hands adjusted the bags unnecessarily. "Dunno rightly," he said at last. "Some kind of bank security, I'd expect. Don't you worry yourself about it, Harry." "Something happened," Harry said, "when we went through it. Not just the crash." "We crashed," Hagrid said, with the cheerfulness of someone who has decided what the subject is going to be. Harry looked at him sideways. Hagrid had one of those faces that were built for honesty and managed deception only by being very obviously uncomfortable doing it. Something large was sitting behind his eyes that he was working hard not to say. Harry was too full of Diagon Alley to press him further, and suspected that pressing him further would get him nowhere useful in any case. He filed it away. He was getting good at that. The last shop on the list was Ollivander's, a narrow, slightly crooked building, set a little apart from the others, its sign so faded you had to know what it said to read it. Inside, the air was very still. Shelves ran from floor to ceiling and deep into the dimness, packed with long, thin boxes in their thousands. Dust drifted. Everything waited. A pale-eyed old man appeared from the back, or materialized from the dusty air itself, it was hard to say, and looked at Harry the way certain people had already begun to look at him today, with recognition, and with something very careful underneath the recognition. This was the wand maker. He measured Harry's wand arm without comment, and began. Box after box, each one pressed into Harry's hand, held for a fraction of a second of complete nothing, and quietly taken back. Birch and dragon heartstring, walnut and unicorn hair, an ebony wand that did something unfortunate to a vase. Then the wand maker disappeared briefly into the shelves and returned with a slim box, set it on the counter, and said, 11 inches. Holly. Phoenix feather. Harry picked it up. Warmth came up through his fingers and into his arm and spread into his chest, and with it came something fitting. The sense of something designed precisely for a space he hadn't known was empty, the particular satisfaction of a key turning in the right lock. Curious, the wand-maker said softly. Very curious. Harry lowered the wand. The warmth was real and present and entirely new, and underneath it, in exactly the same place it had been since the waterfall, was the other thing. The absence, the stripped room feeling, the space where something had been and wasn't anymore. He held both things at once, and couldn't have said which was stranger. He thought, I'm a wizard. He thought, something is missing. He didn't connect them. There was no reason to, and he didn't have the words, even if there had been. He bought the wand. 11 inches. Holly, phoenix feather, supple. He tucked it inside his robes, and it settled against his ribs like something that had been waiting there a long time. On the way back toward the leaky cauldron, Hagrid was quiet. Not the comfortable, easy quiet of nothing to say, but the weighted quiet of something being managed. He had the parcel from the vault inside his coat. Harry could see the outline of it, and he carried it with the particular care of someone who has been trusted and intends to be worthy of it. Harry watched him from the edge of his vision and said nothing. Whatever the question was, he didn't think Hagrid was the one who could answer it. And underneath that, clearer the more he thought about it, Hagrid was Dumbledore's man. Whatever had happened today, Hagrid had already decided that the right thing to do was write a letter and send it north, and that was what he was going to do. They parted at King's Cross. Hagrid had things to attend to, he said, without specifying what. And then Harry was on a train with a cauldron and a bag of books and a wand against his ribs. Then he was at Little Whinging. Then he was standing on the pavement in front of number 4, Privet Drive. The house looked exactly as it had when he'd left it that morning, but it felt different. He couldn't find the word for how. Nothing had changed that he could point to. Not the brickwork, not the window boxes, not the neat square of lawn. But something that had been there, around the house, more than in it, below the threshold of anything he could have named or noticed, was gone. He had grown up inside it without ever hearing it, the way you don't notice air until you step outside. The house without it was just a house, an ordinary house on an ordinary street with no particular reason to keep anyone safer than anywhere else. Petunia Dursley opened the door before Harry reached it. She was a thin, long-faced woman with a long neck, and she looked at him the way she always did, at the cauldron, the bags, then him, as if she were calculating what this all meant for her personally. "Well," she said. "You're back." "Yes," Harry said. He stepped inside and set the cauldron down in the hallway. The house was smaller than it had been that morning, not in its dimensions, but in some quality he couldn't name. He went upstairs, remembered he had a room now, rather than the cupboard, corrected course, and sat on the edge of the bed in the last of the evening light coming through the window, and tried to hold all of it at once, and found he couldn't. Albus Dumbledore read Hagrid's letter twice. Hagrid's handwriting was large and careful, each letter formed with deliberate effort, as if he was always slightly surprised the pen worked. The letter was brief. Hagrid's letters usually were, not because he lacked things to say, but because he was careful with what he committed to writing. It described the waterfall, the crash, the boy's quietness on the walk to the second vault. The way Harry had said he was fine in the voice that children use when they don't know the name of what is wrong with them. Dumbledore set the letter on his desk and did not move for a very long time. Outside his window, the Hogwarts grounds lay in a long blue summer evening, the forbidden forest dark at its edge, The lake, a flat, grey-silver in the distance. Everything sounded the same as it always did. Everything was precisely as it always was. And the bond of blood charm, the one Dumbledore had spent the last night of October 1981 constructing from the ancient magic still warm in Lily Potter's sacrifice, was gone. He had built it to last 17 years. It had lasted 10. The thief's downfall. He had not considered the thief's downfall. He had not considered it because it had not been installed on those cart tracks when he cast the charm, and he had not thought to revisit that assumption in the years since, because there had been no reason to. And now a boy who did not know what had been taken from him was in a house in Little Whinging that was no longer protected by anything except the deeper charm, the one Lily herself had made, the one that lived in the boy's blood and skin and could not be reached by any waterfall, the one that would still make Quirrell burn if he touched the boy. One layer where there had been two. Dumbledore removed his half-moon spectacles and set them on the desk. He sat with the fact for a moment, precisely as it was, without softening it. Then he replaced his spectacles and picked up a quill, and began, carefully, to think about what came next. The letter Dumbledore had been drafting, 3 versions, each more direct than the last, sat sealed on the corner of his desk when morning came to Hogwarts. He had not sent it yet. He had not decided precisely what it should say. He already knew what had happened. The bond of blood charm was gone. He had understood this from the moment he read Hagrid's letter, which had described the facts without the implications, because Hagrid did not know the implications. He knew only that the boy had been through a waterfall and seemed different, and that there was a parcel in his coat he needed to deliver. Dumbledore had carried the knowledge through the rest of the night without doing anything with it, because some things needed to be held for a while before they could be moved. Now it was morning, and he worked through it carefully. The bond of blood had worked by channeling the magic of Lily Potter's sacrifice, not the deeper magic, the counter-charm that had rebounded the killing curse and embedded itself in Harry's blood, but a different layer, a secondary architecture Dumbledore had built above Lily's work in the days after her death. The bond required 2 things: Harry calling Petunia Dursley's house his home, and Petunia having accepted him into it. As long as both conditions held, Voldemort, any extension of Voldemort, any servant or instrument, could not reach Harry at Privet Drive. Both conditions were still technically in place. The bond was not. What remained was the first layer, the direct sacrificial protection, the one Lily had made herself, woven into Harry's blood and skin by the ancient mechanism of a death chosen freely for love. That could not be made or unmade by any goblin waterfall. It would still hold. Quirrell would still burn if he touched the boy. Voldemort, in whatever fractured and barely corporeal form he currently inhabited, could not act physically against Harry without consequence. But the bond had bought more than physical protection. It had bought insulation, a shield around the house, a charm that prevented Voldemort from reaching Harry through agents, through curses aimed at people near him, through situations arranged at a distance. Without it, the world was measurably less careful about what it permitted, and Privet Drive was now an ordinary Muggle house. 2 Muggles, and a boy who knew almost nothing yet about why any of this mattered. Dumbledore stood at his window for some time, watching the grounds go slowly golden in the August morning, and considered what could be done. He could leave Harry at Privet Drive for the remaining weeks before term. Voldemort was weakened, scarcely corporeal, still dependent on Quirrell for even the most basic of actions, years away from any genuine strength. There was no immediate reason to expect an attack in the next month. But there had been a time, not very long ago at all, when Dumbledore's calculations had seemed sound, and he had learned to distrust the version of himself that was reasoning toward a conclusion he preferred. The Order of the Phoenix had disbanded when the war ended 10 years ago, and everyone had gone home. He did not have a network of trusted friends standing ready for exactly this kind of contingency. He had colleagues, a school full of enchantments, and his own judgment, which was not nothing, and was not, at this moment, sufficient. He could bring Harry to Hogwarts early. It would be irregular. There were no students in residence, only a small number of staff. But Hogwarts was a castle of extraordinary protections, its enchantments independent of anything Dumbledore had specifically arranged, and it was the safest building in Britain for a child he could not currently send home. He was still turning this over when he sent the first owl. Minerva McGonagall arrived within 20 minutes, which told him she had been somewhere in the building rather than at home, and that she had moved quickly. She was wearing robes that suggested a night spent not entirely in sleep, and her dark hair, normally pinned into its severe bun with the precision of a woman who considers precision a form of respect, had been put up with less than its usual exactness. She looked at him across the desk. She did not sit. "Tell me," she said. So he did. He described the thief's downfall, a Gringotts security waterfall designed to detect and strip active enchantments from persons in passing carts. He had known of its existence in abstract, as a detail of the deeper goblin defences, but had not accounted for it in his calculations because it had not been installed on the primary cart tracks in the years before. He told her that Harry's cart had passed through it, and that the bond of blood had been stripped. He told her that Lily's direct protection remained intact, which meant Quirrell could not touch Harry. He told her Harry was currently at Privet Drive, which was no longer protected. McGonagall did not speak for a moment after he finished. Her square spectacles, the same frames she wore as herself, as a animagus, the marks of which appeared on her tabby cat form, had a very slight upward tilt when she was angry. Dumbledore had had occasion to observe this many times. "A bank security measure," she said. "Very precisely." "Yes." "Stripped a charm you spent 10 years maintaining." "The charm I spent one night constructing and 10 years relying on," Dumbledore said. "Yes." Something moved across her face. Not the open expression of it. She was far too controlled for that. But the contained version, a rigidity in the jaw, a flatness behind the eyes that meant the feeling was too large to allow out directly. She had spent an entire day sitting on a garden wall in Little Whinging, in the form of a tabby cat, watching a family she had described to him as the worst sort of muggles. She had told him the boy should not be placed with them. He had thanked her for her concern and overridden it, and that had been 10 years ago, and she had not raised it since. She did not raise it now. "Where does he go?" she said. It was not quite a question. "I am considering bringing him here early. That is irregular." "It is also," Dumbledore said, "the safest option I currently have." A pause. McGonagall nodded once, short, precise, the nod of someone who is not entirely satisfied, but can accurately count the available alternatives. "He hasn't been told anything?" "He knows something happened in the waterfall. He doesn't know what it was." "He is 11 years old," she said. "He is not so young that he cannot be told the truth about his own situation." "I know," Dumbledore said. It was as close as he came in that moment to saying, "I am aware of what it costs when I withhold things." She left. He sent the second owl. Severus Snape came into the room the way he always entered rooms, without noise, without unnecessary movement, with the precise economy of someone who had learned long ago that taking up less space gave others less to work with. He sat in the chair across the desk and looked at Dumbledore with dark eyes that gave nothing away and were very good at it. Dumbledore told him what he had told McGonagall. Snape listened without interrupting. He always did. He had a particular quality of stillness when he was processing something alarming, a slight change in how still he became, and Dumbledore had been watching for it long enough to recognize it. When Dumbledore finished, Snape said, "Where is the boy?" "Little whinging. For the moment." "That is idiotic." "Yes," Dumbledore said. Snape looked at him. The immediate agreement seemed to unsettle him more than a defense would have. He was quiet for a moment. "You said Lily's protection holds." "It does. Quirrell cannot touch him." "Quirrell is in the school," Snape said. "He has the defense position for this year. He will be near the boy all year." "He will," Dumbledore said. "As will you." A silence. Snape looked at the surface of the desk rather than at Dumbledore, the way a man looks at something he is using to keep his face arranged. Then, "I'll watch Quirrell." It was not an offer. It was a statement of something he had already decided, delivered as a courtesy. Dumbledore nodded. Snape stood. He paused at the door with his hand on the frame. "The boy doesn't know," he said. "Not yet. Not until I can tell him properly." Snape said nothing to this. He left the way he had come in, without noise, without excess, and the door drew closed behind him, and Dumbledore sat alone in his study, with the quiet of an August morning around him, and thought about a boy in a house in Surrey who had gone to the bank yesterday and come back carrying something new in one pocket and something missing from somewhere he had no name for, and he picked up the third draft of his letter and began, at last, to write it. The barrier between platforms 9 and 10 required a bit of faith. Walk toward the wall, do not slow down, trust that it would give way. And Harry did it with his stomach tight. And then he was through, and the Hogwarts Express was there, scarlet, enormous, wreathed in steam. The Dursleys had dropped him at the curb without getting out of the car. He'd spent the rest of August at Privet Drive reading his school books and noticing that the house didn't feel the way it used to. Below anything he could name, something was simply gone, and he had been glad, on the platform, to leave it. He found a compartment. The train filled. He watched the Weasleys board through the window, 4 redheads trailing a trolley, the tallest wearing a prefect badge, 2 identical ones behind him, and then a 4th, younger, with ears that stuck out and something inexplicable on the bridge of his nose. The younger one knocked. "Anyone in here? Everywhere else is packed." "Just me," Harry said. So Ron Weasley came in and dropped into the seat opposite with the ease of someone who doesn't treat space as a negotiation. He was tall, red-haired, freckled down his arms and across his nose, with robes that had clearly started life on an older brother. He set his owl on the seat beside him and looked at Harry with straightforward, uncalculating curiosity. Something simple settled between them almost immediately. Ron's family came out in the first 15 minutes. The prefect was Percy, 5th year. The 2 identical ones were Fred and George, 3rd years. A brother named Bill worked abroad with Gringotts. Another named Charlie had dragons in Romania. He had a second-hand wand and a rat named Scabbers, and a genuine expertise in chess. Harry offered him half the trolley's worth of food. He had money now, actual money, and things he'd been passing in shop windows all his life. And Ron accepted without ceremony. They were comparing chocolate frog cards when the compartment door slid open and a girl appeared. Bushy brown hair, large front teeth, robes already correctly fastened, an expression of productive concern. "Have you seen a toad? A boy named Neville has lost one." They hadn't. The girl, Hermione Granger, surveyed the state of the compartment with the look of someone forming an opinion. "You both should change into your robes. We'll arrive soon." She left to continue her search. A round-faced boy appeared in the doorway, holding a toad with both hands. "She found Trevor," he said. He looked between them. "I'm Neville." Then the train began to slow, and the Scottish dark outside shifted, and what came into view across the black water of the lake made Harry press his face to the glass. It wasn't just the towers or the lights, though there were towers and lights enough to last a lifetime. It was the sense of the thing, the sense that the castle had been in exactly this place for longer than anyone Harry could think of had been alive, and had no interest in being anywhere else, and was not going anywhere, and was not impressed by how long you'd been waiting to arrive at it. Harry was in a boat with Neville and 2 others, the cold water moving silently beneath them, and the thing that had been stretched thin since July, since the waterfall, since the house stopped being any kind of home, settled, not resolved, just settled. He pressed that against his ribs and kept it. He thought, without quite knowing what he meant by it, "This is what I was supposed to find." Then the gates and the great stone staircase and the antechamber where Professor McGonagall, square-spectacled, severe, entirely unimpressed by 40 first years, told them to wait. Then the doors opened. The great hall had a ceiling that showed the night sky, stars behind light cloud, and 1,000 floating candles below it throwing warm, uneven light across the 4 long tables. The Sorting Hat sat at the front of the room on a stool, battered, patched at the brim, old in the way of things that have been used seriously for a long time. It sang. The song had rhymes and a point of view. Harry watched it through the whole thing. They went in alphabetical order. Hermione sorted into Gryffindor in under a minute, and sat down with the air of someone who had expected nothing less. Neville sorted into Gryffindor after a long, anxious wait, and the relief on his face was visible from 10 feet away. Then, Harry Potter. The hall went quiet in a way it had not gone quiet for anyone else. Harry walked to the stool, sat, and felt the hat come down over his eyes, and the world went dark, and something old and attentive woke up. "Well," said the hat, clearly, inside his mind. Harry held still. "I sought a great many students," the hat continued, in the patient tone of something with centuries of practice. "I know the ordinary shapes of courage and cleverness and ambition. You have all of those. But underneath them, there is something in your blood that is not the ordinary kind. Someone made a choice for you before you were old enough to make choices. Someone gave up the only thing they had, freely, for love of you, and what that kind of love does, when it is truly given without condition, is it doesn't leave. It settles into the blood. It holds. You have been carrying it all your life without knowing what it was." Harry thought, "My mother." He did not know how he knew. He just knew. The hat continued, quieter. "I can feel the shape of what was taken from you, like a room stripped bare. But what you carry instead is older than any charm, and I do not think it can be stripped by anything. What was removed from you last summer, yes, I can feel where it was, like a ring on a finger that is not there anymore. That was not the real protection. The real protection is the older thing, the deeper thing. There is more than one kind in this world. You carry the kind that costs the most to make. Remember that." Then, Gryffindor. The hall found its voice. Harry walked to the Gryffindor table, where Ron was already pointing at the open seat beside him, sat down, and spent a moment with the hat's words before letting the noise of the feast carry them. The food appeared. Ron began a detailed account of the Chudley Cannon's declining fortunes that Harry followed with about a quarter of his attention, because the other 3/4 were on the high table. He was scanning the professors the way you scan any new room for the things that matter, when his gaze landed on Snape. Dark-haired, pale, hooked-nosed, watching the first years with the expression of someone performing an assessment. Snape's eyes moved to Harry's and then deliberately away. Harry's scar gave a brief, faint prickle. Not quite pain, more like a word spoken in a room next door, and was gone before he could be certain. He kept looking. Toward the far end of the table, a young professor with a purple turban and the uncertain posture of someone uncomfortable in their own body. Quirrell. Defense Against the Dark Arts. Harry had heard the name on the train. Quirrell was looking at his plate. Harry looked at Quirrell. What happened was not ambiguous. His scar erupted in a focused stab of pain that made his eyes fill before he'd decided to let them. Sharp, specific, entirely unlike the faint prickle near Snape. He pressed his fingers to his forehead. Ron's voice. "You all right?" "Fine," Harry said. He moved his gaze away. The pain dissolved immediately, cleanly, as if it required his attention to exist. He kept his eyes on his plate and ran through what he'd just felt with the quiet, methodical attention of someone who has learned to take careful note of things other people would prefer he ignore. 2 sources. 2 completely different kinds. The faint prickle from Snape's direction, gone already. The sharp stab from Quirrell, arriving the moment he looked and leaving the moment he didn't. Not a headache. Not nothing. He picked up his fork and ate and let the conversation flow around him and waited for the year to show him what it was going to be. The dungeon smelled of old stone and something preserved, a cold damp that lived in the walls regardless of how many torches were lit, and shelves along every surface holding jars of things in fluid that Harry had learned not to look at directly if he wanted to pay attention during class. He'd been at Hogwarts for just over a month. He had found his way to most of his classes without incident. The potions dungeon was different from the others in a way he hadn't been able to articulate until he was sitting in it. It felt intentional, as if the coldness and the dimness and the faint smell of the jars were part of the pedagogy. Snape came in without noise and stood at the front of the room and looked at the class in a way that settled the remaining conversation before he'd opened his mouth. "You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion making. It is not wand-waving. It is not the performance of incantation." His voice was low and very precise, and it carried without effort. "It requires attention, patience, and a willingness to be exactly as good as the work demands. Not as good as you imagine yourselves to be." Harry had been warned about Snape. Ron had warned him on the train. Percy had said something Ron had relayed in edited form. Neville had simply said his grandmother described Snape as formidable, and that she had not meant this kindly. What Harry had not been prepared for was the particular quality of Snape's attention. It was not the look of a teacher examining a student, and it was not quite the look of an enemy. It was the look of a person who had already calculated the dimensions of a problem and was now measuring the original against the estimate. Precise. Uncomfortable. It made Harry sit very straight. Snape took them through basic theory and then set them to work on a boil cure antidote. Harry followed the instructions carefully and did not do badly. He kept noticing Snape moving through the room, not looking at Harry directly, not when Harry was watching, but with the contained economy of someone always doing 2 things at once. The lesson ended. Harry packed his things and thought. That went fine, which was exactly the kind of thought that precedes things not being fine. 2 hours later, Snape stood at the front of his empty classroom and thought about what he had just seen. He had known since August, since Dumbledore's study, since the quiet statement that the bond of blood charm is gone, and he had spent the intervening weeks waiting for the moment when the situation would present itself properly. He had been in the same building as the boy for 5 weeks. Today was the first time he had been in the same room. Harry Potter had Lily Evans's eyes, precisely and exactly her eyes, the same green, the same quality of directness, in James Potter's face, above James Potter's nose, below James Potter's hair. None of this was the boy's fault. None of it was easy to look at regardless. What he had not expected was the other thing. Without the bond of blood sitting over the boy like a second skin, a vast, invisible overlay that would have smoothed his magical signature and routed it through the charm structure. Harry Potter's magic was simply present. Snape had no precise technical language for what he had observed in the classroom. There was only the fact. The boy felt different from what Snape had been told to expect. More exposed, more raw at the edges. Whatever Lily had put in his blood was right there, close to the surface, with nothing between it and the world. Like a bare live wire where there should have been insulation. Snape picked up the chalk from where he'd set it on the desk. He put it back precisely where it went. He thought, the boy will not have an ordinary year. Defense against the dark arts met on Tuesdays. Harry found the classroom on the 2nd floor, smelling faintly of garlic and something floral underneath that had been recently and not entirely successfully burned. He took a seat beside Ron. He got out his notebook. He was reaching for his quill when Quirrell turned from the blackboard and Harry's scar exploded. It was not like the prickle near Snape. It was not like the sharper stab he'd felt during the sorting, which had lasted a moment and dissolved. This arrived with focus and precision, and stayed. A pain behind his eyes that made the edges of his vision unsteady, that made him stop breathing for a moment without deciding to. He pressed the flat of his hand to his forehead. Ron, beside him, leaned sideways. "You all right?" "Fine," Harry said. He dropped his hand to the desk and picked up his quill. Quirrell had turned back to the blackboard. The chalk moved in small, careful letters. He had a stammer that emerged when he was explaining things, a hesitation on certain consonants that added time to everything he said, and a habit of apologizing for it briefly, which caused the class to produce a collective embarrassed silence each time it happened. The purple turban was wrapped neatly, a small trailing end of fabric catching when he turned his head. He had not looked at Harry since Harry walked in. Harry watched him and noticed. The pain rose when Quirrell turned to face the class and dropped when he faced the board. A consistent variation, a signal with directionality, as if Harry's scar were a compass and Quirrell the thing it was pointing at. He watched this for the whole lesson. He told Ron and Hermione in the corridor after. He told them about the Great Hall on the night of the sorting, the 2 kinds of pain, the difference between Snape's side of the high table and Quirrell's end of it. He told them about potions that morning, the faint prickle near Snape, brief, already gone, and he told them what had just happened in Dada, and that it had been going in the same direction for an hour. Ron's expression cycled through several things. Couldn't it be coincidence? 3 times, Harry said. Sorting, potions now, and each time it was different. Near Snape it's barely there. A second, then it's gone. Near Quirrell, it's as if someone's driven a nail into my head. "That's not nothing," Ron said, sounding like someone who would prefer it to be nothing. Hermione had her notebook out. This had started to seem to Harry like something she did when she was thinking, rather than when she was writing. The same way other people drummed their fingers or looked at the ceiling. She hadn't spoken yet. "What do you actually know about your scar?" she said. Harry touched it without meaning to. Not much. Voldemort gave it to me when he tried to kill me. Yes, and then he couldn't kill you, and he vanished, and the scar stayed. But what is it? What does it mean that it hurts? Why does it respond to one person and not another? She looked at her notebook, as if the answers were already in there, and she just hadn't written them yet. I'm going to the library. She's going to solve your scar, Ron said. I'm going to research your scar, Hermione corrected without looking up. Solving it is a subsequent step. Harry watched her go and thought, I should have started asking these questions in August. He had spent those weeks not asking because he hadn't known what to ask, and he was starting to understand that not knowing the questions was its own kind of answer. The note Snape sent to Dumbledore was a single sheet, written that evening after the last of his office hours. It took him 20 minutes to draft because precision requires time, and a report to Dumbledore required more precision than most communications. He reported, the scar's reactivity to Quirrell's proximity was measurable and directional. He had not directly observed it in potions, but the pattern was clear from comparison. Under the expected conditions, meaning with the bond of blood in place, as it had been for the past decade, the scar's sensitivity to Voldemort's presence would have been moderated by the charm's overlay. Without the overlay, the connection appeared to operate without mediation. The signal was cleaner, it was also more acute, and the boy had no existing framework for understanding what he was receiving. He also reported, the boy noticed. He is observant in the way that children become observant when adults have given them insufficient information, and he has apparently concluded that information must be gathered by other means, he told his friends. He will continue to watch Quirrell. Given that his observations are correct, this is not a problem in the short term. Given that correct observations may lead an 11-year-old toward action, it may become one. He signed it with an initial and sent it north by his own owl and went to stand at his office window and watch the grounds go dark. He did not think about Lily Potter's eyes. He had had 10 years of practice not thinking about them, and one afternoon in a potions classroom was not going to change that. The inquiry hall at Gringotts was not designed for comfort. It had been designed for precision, which was a different thing and preferable. The walls were unornamented stone. The table was long. The 5 senior goblins seated behind it had the particular stillness of people who do not need to demonstrate their authority, because the room itself demonstrated it for them. Griphook stood before the panel and gave his account. He had been the cart operator on the incident in question. He had transported one Harry James Potter, heir to Vault 687, and his designated guardian, Rubeus Hagrid, on authorized access to the vault. He had also been transporting the guardian to Vault 713 under separate standing instruction. The cart passage toward Vault 713 had taken them through the thief's downfall. The thief's downfall had activated. The senior goblin at the center of the panel, ancient, silver-braided, with the careful deliberateness of someone who had overseen 3 decades of incident inquiries, set down his pen. On a legitimate account holder. On one of the persons in the cart, Griphook said, the waterfall does not assess legitimacy. It assesses enchantment. There was an active enchantment on one of the cart's occupants. And you determined this from what evidence? From the activation itself, and from the enchanter's subsequent residue examination. Griphook kept his tone flat and complete. The waterfall functioned correctly. The activation was appropriate to the enchantment present. The enchantment on the visitor was real. The panel's senior member looked at him for a moment. Then the question is what enchantment and why it was not disclosed to the bank. Griphook agreed that this was the question. He agreed with the precision of someone who had been waiting for exactly this formulation. The examination of the tunnel aftermath had been conducted over 3 days by Gringotts's resident enchanters, whose specialty was the classification of magical residue, a skill developed across centuries of handling curse-broken artifacts from 100 cultures and detecting contamination in vault contents. They worked methodically. They were very good. Their report reached Griphook's desk on the 4th day. The language was technical. The substance was not ambiguous. What the enchanters had found in the tunnel residue was the trace of an external protective charm of the blood-based familial type. Old construction, not in the sense of ancient lore, but built from something ancient, a freely chosen death, a sacrifice made in love. The charm had been sealed through familial acceptance. Someone with a blood connection to the enchanted person had opened their home to them, and the magic had read this as a gate and locked itself through it. The charm had been operating on the boy for approximately a decade before the waterfall stripped it. The enchanters used no human terminology. They had no reason to. What they understood was the category, a protective overlay placed externally on a person, of precisely the type the thief's downfall was constructed to detect and strip. The bank's security had worked correctly. The question was, who had placed a concealment of this magnitude on an 11-year-old depositor without informing the bank of its existence? Gringotts did not police the private arrangements of its customers, but enchantments, stripped in the bank's tunnels and documented in its records, fell under a disclosure framework. The incident required explanation from someone qualified in human protective enchantment practice. The panel had instructed Griphook to contact the bank's nearest qualified human magical specialist. That was Bill Weasley, stationed in Egypt. Bill read the inquiry summary in his camp office in Luxor by the light of 3 oil lanterns at the end of a long day of work on a tomb his team had been clearing for most of the year. He read it through once, and then read it again more slowly. He was 20 years old and had been working for Gringotts for 2 years, and had in that time developed the curse-breaker's instinct for knowing when something looked more complicated than it had been filed as. What the summary described, blood-based external charm, sealed through familial acceptance, built from a freely chosen sacrifice, was not complicated in the filing sense. In the practical sense, it was very complicated indeed. He checked the name of the account holder in the attached file. Harry Potter. He had seen the sorting announcement in the Prophet 2 months ago. They always printed it. He had thought, good for him, and turned the page. He thought now, someone very powerful spent 10 years protecting this child, and a Gringotts security measure stripped it in a cart tunnel. He reached for his pen. His written assessment ran to 4 pages. He described what a bond of blood charm was, an exceptionally rare class of protective enchantment constructed from the residue of a sacrificial death, freely given in love rather than in spell mechanics, requiring the caster to work with the residue while it was still active. The charm was sealed by a specific familial act and created a protective overlay anchored to a home, active for as long as the protected person could call it home or until they came of age. He had encountered the theory in his studies. He had never seen one documented in the field because they were vanishingly rare, and the circumstances required to create one appeared in history roughly once or twice per century. He noted, the thief's downfall had removed it correctly. A bond of blood was exactly the kind of external enchantment the waterfall was designed to detect, a concealment and protection overlay operating on a person in a passing cart. No error. The bank's security had functioned as intended. He noted, if the charm was removed, the protected person was no longer under that layer of protection. Whoever had cast the bond should be made aware that it had been stripped. He could not attend the inquiry panel in person. His contract ran 7 more weeks, and breaking it would cost the bank more in practical terms than the inquiry warranted. but the information needed to reach whoever was responsible for the boy's safety. He sent the assessment to the bank's London office by Goblin courier. Then he took a second sheet of parchment and wrote a shorter letter. He addressed it to Albus Dumbledore, headmaster, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. He wrote he was a Gringotts curse-breaker who had consulted on the July incident at the bank's request. He enclosed a copy of his assessment, which described what had been stripped from the student Harry Potter in the Gringotts tunnels on 31st July 1991. If the headmaster already knew, no response was necessary. If he did not, Bill thought he should. He sent it, and sat for a moment in his lamplit office with the Egyptian night outside, and thought about what it meant that someone had spent 10 years constructing a protection of that complexity and rarity around a child, and the protection had ended not through age or intention, but because a bank's security waterfall had been installed on a cart track. He thought about the Potters the way everyone his age who had grown up in the wizarding world thought about them, with the particular weight of something that happened when you were too young to understand it, and that had shaped everything since. He was 7 when it happened. He was 20 now, and he understood what it had cost, and the understanding did not make it lighter. He went back to his notes on Egyptian curse architecture and tried to focus on the work. Dumbledore received both documents on the same afternoon in early November. The formal inquiry notice from Gringotts with the Enchanter's residue report appended, and a separate shorter letter from a curse-breaker named William Weasley, who had apparently thought it prudent to send a copy to the school as well. He read the letter first, then the report, then the residue examination in detail. He set all 3 documents side by side on his desk and looked at them. He had known since July. He had known from Hagrid's letter, had understood immediately what the waterfall would have stripped. But there is a difference between knowing a thing in private and seeing it documented, between a conclusion reached alone and an official record, filed in goblin ledgers by professional enchanters who had examined the residue directly and written it up without sentiment or ambiguity. The bond of blood was gone. It was gone on the record. Gringotts had confirmed it, categorized it, and closed the file. Griphook initialed the inquiry report that same afternoon and filed it in the closed section of the archive. Incident resolved. Enchantment type identified. External caster notified. No security error on Gringotts' part. He did not think about the boy. That was not part of the filing. Ron left on the 20th of December in a tide of Weasley luggage and good cheer, and a paper bag of sandwiches his mother had sent via owl. And after that, the castle went quiet in the particular way that large buildings go quiet when most of the people have left them. A quality of space rather than of silence. The sound of your own footsteps, where before there was always someone else's. Harry had not gone back to Privet Drive. Dumbledore had arranged for him to stay, and Harry had not asked why, because the answer to that question was something he was still learning to hold and hadn't yet found the right moment for. He was glad. He had been glad since September and had not examined the gladness too closely, because examining it led to thinking about July, and July led to thinking about why the sense of having somewhere to return to had stopped one afternoon in a bank tunnel and not come back. Christmas morning arrived. There were presents at the foot of his bed, small things from Ron's family, which he unwrapped with the particular care of someone who has received very few presents and has not yet become casual about the experience. Then, at the bottom of the pile, a parcel wrapped in paper, so ordinary it seemed almost deliberate, and inside it a cloak. He unfolded it in the grey Christmas morning light, and the fabric moved through his hands like water, and gave off no warmth and no weight, and when he draped it over his arm, the arm disappeared. He held it for a while. There was a brief note, unsigned, that said only, Your father left this in my keeping. Use it well." He read the note twice. He folded it and put it in his trunk. Then he spent an hour being invisible in the empty dormitory, which told him almost nothing useful but felt, in a way he couldn't articulate, like something very specific and good. He went wandering that night. The castle at Christmas had a different quality, the usual noise replaced by a kind of companionable emptiness, the torches burning lower. Harry had the invisibility cloak over his shoulders, and his feet found a door he had not noticed before. Not locked, opening onto a room that smelled of stone and long disuse. The mirror stood against the far wall, taller than he was, in an ornate gilded frame, carved with a script that ran around the edge in a continuous line. He raised the lantern he'd borrowed from the entrance hall and read the inscription, or tried to. The letters made no sense until he read them backward and understood that he was seeing words reflected in a mirror that showed you what you most desired. He looked into the mirror. A woman with red hair and green eyes. His eyes he understood in a lurch of recognition, the eyes always described in the past tense, in the conditional. She had your eyes. Not past tense here. Present. She was looking at him. She was standing beside a man with hair as dark and messily wrong as Harry's own, the man's arm around her, and both of them looking at Harry with an expression he had no name for, the expression of people who are precisely where they most want to be, which is next to him. His parents were 21 when they died. They looked 21. They looked young, was the thing. Young in a way that meant something different now that he was 11 and could do the arithmetic. They were 2 decades too young, and they were looking at him. He stood there for a very long time. He came back the next night, and the night after that. He couldn't explain it entirely. He already knew what he would see. It would not change. The mirror showed the deepest desire, and his deepest desire did not update night to night. It was the oldest kind of wanting, below the threshold of wanting, existing simply as fact. He thought, on the 3rd night, this is what I was supposed to feel when I came home. He had felt something at Privet Drive, something ambient, below his ability to name. And then in July it had stopped, and the house was just a house. Hogwarts felt more like home than anywhere he had lived, but home is not the same as family, and the mirror knew the difference. You've been coming here for 3 nights now. Harry startled so badly the lantern swung. Dumbledore was standing in the doorway, tall and silver-haired, his blue eyes doing the thing they sometimes did when he was watching you directly. Not just seeing you, but seeing through you to the architecture underneath. Harry had not heard him coming. He had not heard anything. Harry said. Yes. Dumbledore came into the room. He was wearing robes that suggested he had not been to bed, or perhaps only that he kept unusual hours, which Harry was beginning to think was simply how Dumbledore worked. He stood beside Harry and looked not at the mirror, but at Harry, with an expression that was very careful about something. "Do you know what it shows you?" he said. "Yes," Harry said. "I figured it out." Dumbledore looked at the mirror. He was quiet for a moment. "What do you see?" Harry looked back at his parents in the glass. His mother's red hair, his father's dark, untidy mess of it. The way they were standing close together and looking at him as if he were the most important thing in the room. He said, "My family." Dumbledore's expression did something that Harry didn't have the language for. There was a quality to the silence that followed, a weight in it, more than the pause of someone choosing their next words, as if Dumbledore were not only deciding what to say, but deciding what to withhold, and the deciding cost something. "The Mirror of Erist," Dumbledore said finally, "shows us nothing more and nothing less than the deepest, most desperate desire of our hearts. It does not give us what we want. It only shows us. Men have wasted away before it, not knowing whether what they see is real or possible, unable to leave what they cannot have." Harry looked at the woman with his eyes, and the man with his hair. "I know it isn't real," he said. "I'm not going to waste away." "I know," Dumbledore said, and there was something in his voice that sounded like he believed it, and something underneath that sounded like relief, and something underneath that which Harry could not read at all. "What do you see?" Harry asked. "When you look in it." A pause. Dumbledore turned to look at the mirror. He looked at it for a long moment, with an expression that gave nothing away and gave everything away simultaneously. "Socks," he said. Harry looked at him. "One can never have enough socks," Dumbledore said pleasantly. "Another Christmas has come and gone, and I have given no one useful socks." He said it with such careful seriousness that Harry almost believed it. The delivery was too precise for the claim to be entirely false, and too precise not to be concealing something else. Harry filed it without pressing. "Did you know my parents?" he said instead. Dumbledore's expression shifted, a small movement in the lines around his eyes. "Yes," he said. "I knew your mother well. She was among the most gifted students I have taught. And afterward, she was extraordinary in the ways that matter most, in her choices, in what she was willing to do, and for whom." Harry was quiet. He looked at the woman in the glass. She was still looking at him. "She had my eyes," he said. It came out more plainly than he expected. "She did," Dumbledore said. "And they were hers first." Harry stayed with that for a moment. Then he reached up and touched the edge of the mirror's frame without quite meaning to, and dropped his hand. "I won't come back," he said. "I know I shouldn't. I just—" He stopped. Started again. "It's different this year, from how it was before. Being here. Hogwarts, I mean. It feels more like—" He couldn't finish it. He didn't have the word for the thing he wanted to say. Dumbledore looked at him for a moment. His expression had the quality of a person who knows exactly what word is being looked for, and has decided that the other person needs to find it themselves. "You don't have to explain it to me," he said, quietly. "Not tonight." Harry wrapped the invisibility cloak around himself for the walk back to Gryffindor Tower. The fabric moved over his shoulders and down, and he disappeared into it. No weight, no warmth, nothing to indicate he was there. And he stood for a moment in the corridor outside the room with the mirror and felt the absence of himself, and found it a relief. The mirror showed him what he couldn't have. The cloak gave him something different, the ability to be no one for a while, to go from a person who was always noticed, always the name said with that particular weight, to a shape in a corridor with no name at all. The mirror was desire. The cloak was something more like rest. He walked back through the quiet castle, invisible and alone, and not particularly unhappy about either, and thought about his mother's eyes looking back at him from a mirror, and about Dumbledore's voice when he said, "And they were hers first." February in Scotland arrives without ceremony, a slightly different shade of grey outside the windows, the cold moving inside from outside rather than being generated by the stone itself. Harry had been watching Quirrell for 4 months. The scar pain in defense against the dark arts had settled into a pattern, present, directional, consistent, reliably worse when Quirrell turned to address the class, and reliably better the moment Harry's attention moved elsewhere. He had stopped flinching. He had started cataloguing. Hermione had been in the library since October. She found the three-headed dog first, or found the reference to it, which was the part that mattered. She slid a book across the common room table one Tuesday evening and pointed to a paragraph. Cerberus class magical creatures, first recorded in Greek antiquity, thereafter appearing in wizard-rearing traditions in various cultures. Known susceptibility? Music. Any musical sound produced in its presence causes temporary soporific effect. Fluffy, Ron said. He had heard the name from his brothers. Hagrid called it Fluffy. He let it slip over the summer. The dog that's guarding the trap-door on the 3rd floor, Hermione said. The thing under the trap-door is what Hagrid took out of Gringotts. She looked at Harry. The parcel from the vault. Harry had told them about the parcel months ago. The small brown paper package Hagrid had tucked into his coat with that particular care of someone entrusted with something important. He had told them about Vault 714 and the empty shelf Quirrell had found. He had not told them yet about Nicholas Flamel, because he hadn't known about Nicholas Flamel yet. He found out that same week when Hermione came down from the library with a look on her face that meant she had been right about something. Hermione said, Nicholas Flamel. She had been looking through an extremely old copy of a resource text on alchemical history and had found a reference, not long, but precise. She read it aloud. A French alchemist, the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone, some 660 years old at the time of writing, still living on the elixir of life that the stone produced. The stone was the only thing of its kind known to exist. It could produce gold, and it could produce the elixir. The elixir makes you immortal, Ron said slowly. Indefinitely extended life, Hermione corrected, which is not quite the same thing. But for practical purposes, someone wants to steal it, Harry said. He was thinking about the vault, the grubby little package on the shelf, the emptiness when Quirrell arrived to find it gone. It was in Vault 714. Quirrell came for it the same day we were there. He went to the vault after we left and found it already gone because Hagrid had already taken it. And then it ended up here. Here being Hogwarts, Ron said, which has a three-headed dog. And other things, Hermione said. I've read about the other protections. There are more below the trap-door than just the dog. She listed them with the precision of someone who had been making notes for months. A plant that kills by strangulation, recoils from fire, flying keys, a chess set, a logic puzzle, and at the end, whatever the final layer is. Harry said, Quirrell is the one trying to get to it. The 3rd week of February was when he saw the corridor. He had been wearing the invisibility cloak more often than he technically should have, and it had taken him to parts of the castle he would not otherwise have had reason to visit. He was on the 5th floor for no particular reason, moving quietly in the dark past a tapestry of dancing trolls, when he heard voices. One precise and very low, one with a stammer that identified it immediately. He stopped. He pressed himself against the wall and did not move. Through the gap where the corridor turned, Snape stood before Quirrell, with the posture of someone who has the upper hand and intends to keep it. His voice came through quietly, and with the quality it always had in potions, the low, unhurried delivery of someone who never needs to raise his voice to make a point. Harry couldn't hear the words precisely, only their shape, warning, precision, expectation. Whatever Snape was saying, it had the structure of a threat made by someone not threatened. Quirrell's stammer was worse than in class. His answers were short and came out in pieces. Harry's scar began to ache. Not sharply, not the eruption of a Data lesson, when Quirrell turned and the pain hit immediately. A duller version, the throb of something that had been going on in the background for a while and was only now making itself noticed. He pressed 2 fingers to his forehead and thought, Quirrell, not Snape. Quirrell is in this corridor, and my scar is doing what it does near Quirrell. The obvious surface reading of the scene was that Snape was threatening Quirrell, cornering him, extracting something, making demands. Harry filed that reading. He also filed the other thing. His scar hurt near Quirrell and not near Snape, and it had been hurting for the duration of this conversation, and it would keep hurting as long as Quirrell was in this corridor, and it would stop when Quirrell left, and it was doing none of those things because of Snape. He held still under the invisibility cloak and waited for the corridor to clear. Afterwards, in the common room, Ron and Hermione both looked at him. It was Snape threatening Quirrell, Ron said. He had been saying some version of this for months. That's the proof. Snape is the one who wants the stone. Snape was threatening Quirrell, Harry said, or warning him, or something. But my scar hurt the whole time, and it wasn't hurting near Snape. Your scar could have been reacting to the situation, Hermione said carefully. She was doing the thing she did when she had a hypothesis, and was testing it against the evidence, rather than defending it. Tension. Anxiety. It reacts to Quirrell, Harry said. Specifically. I've been testing it for 4 months. It's directional, Hermione. It's been pointing at Quirrell since September, and it pointed at Quirrell in that corridor tonight, and Snape can't produce scar pain in me when he's not even facing my direction. Ron was quiet for a moment. He looked at Hermione. He looked at Harry. You really believe it's Quirrell? I'm certain, Harry said. He said it with the particular certainty of someone whose body had been giving him the same unambiguous signal for 4 months, and who had finally run out of reasons to doubt it. Without the bond of blood, whatever that had been, whatever it had done, the scar's signal was clean, unmediated. It pointed at one thing, and only one thing, and it had never once pointed at Snape. Harry did not know the technical explanation for why this was true. He knew that it was. Hermione looked down at her notes for a long moment. Then, all right, she said. Not agreement, exactly. A decision to proceed on the basis of available evidence. Snape knew the boy had been in the corridor. He had not seen him. The cloak was the reason. But there are other ways of knowing things. A corridor's air carries more information than most people read. There had been a quality to the space near the tapestry that wasn't right, and Snape had learned to notice things that weren't right long before it became habit. Dumbledore had mentioned the cloak at Christmas. Snape had filed this in the part of his mind, reserved for information that needed to be held, but not examined. He had known since August that the boy was observant. He had known since October that the boy was watching Quirrell. He had not confronted Harry because there was nothing to confront. The boy had been in a corridor where Snape was doing his job, watching Quirrell, warning him away from the stone, making clear that his increasingly transparent attempts had been noticed. The boy had watched this from under a cloak and drawn whatever conclusions he'd drawn. Snape marked a set of essays and thought, the boy has correctly identified which professor to watch. He had arrived at it by an indirect route. The scar, months of testing, the patience of someone who learned early that evidence matters more than instinct. But he had arrived at it. He would not be going down the wrong corridor when it mattered. He thought about Lily Potter's eyes in a face that was otherwise entirely James, and about the 11-year-old who had those eyes and a scar and was, against Snape's better judgment, apparently rather competent. He went back to the essays. The note from Dumbledore arrived Tuesday in late April, a brief line in silver ink asking Harry to come to his study at 7 o'clock. No explanation. No subject. Harry had been expecting something like this. Not a Tuesday specifically, but the general shape of a conversation that had been delayed since September, that he had been carrying in outline since the corridor, where Snape warned Quirrell in a voice Harry had eventually stopped misreading. He told Ron and Hermione at breakfast, and spent the rest of the day not quite thinking about it, the way you spend time not thinking about something that occupies every available corner. He said sherbet lemon to the gargoyle, and climbed the stairs. Dumbledore's study was circular, warm, crowded with the oddities of a very long life. Brass instruments on shelves, a large red and gold bird on a perch, watching Harry with amber eyes, the portraits of former headmasters noting his arrival. Dumbledore was at his desk with his hands folded, and an expression Harry had learned over the year, but had not yet learned to read. "Sit down," Dumbledore said. "I have something to tell you. I should have told you sooner, and I want to say that first, before I say anything else. I am telling you this later than I should have." Harry sat. He waited. "Something happened to you at Gringotts last summer," Dumbledore said, "when the cart passed through the thief's downfall. You have known something happened. You felt it leave. I want to tell you what it was." He explained it plainly, without preface. The night of October 31st, 1981. Lily Potter had refused to step aside when Voldemort ordered her to. She had the chance to live. She did not take it. She stood between Harry and Voldemort, and chose, freely and with full knowledge of what it would cost, to die for him. That choice, made in love, freely given, created a countercharm, ancient magic. It rebounded Voldemort's curse and left its mark on Harry as his scar. That protection lived in Harry's blood and his skin. It was still there. "What I did," Dumbledore continued, "in the days after Lily and James died, was build something additional on top of that. A charm of my own, grounded in what Lily had created. The bond of blood. I cast it the night I placed you at Privet Drive. It worked like this. As long as you could call your aunt's house home, as long as Petunia Dursley had accepted you into it, the ancient magic in your blood was extended into a shield around the house. While the bond held, Voldemort could not reach you at that address, and no agent of his could either." "She didn't want me," Harry said. "Petunia. She never wanted me there." "No," Dumbledore said, "but she opened the door. She let you in. The magic reads the act, not the feeling. The bond sealed on that acceptance, and held for 10 years. Until Gringotts. The thief's downfall is a security waterfall designed to strip active enchantments from persons in passing carts. The bond was exactly that, an external charm imposed on a person from outside. The waterfall stripped it as it was designed to do. I had not anticipated this, because it had not been installed on those cart tracks in any prior year. That is not an excuse. It is an account of what happened." Harry was quiet. One of the portraits shifted in its frame. The bird on the perch turned its head. "You placed a charm on me without telling me," Harry said. "Yes. And you sent me to live with people who didn't want me because it made the bond work." "Yes. All of that is accurate. I placed a charm on you without your knowledge, and I kept you at Privet Drive for 10 years without telling you why. Because I calculated that telling you would cause more harm than not telling you. That calculation was mine to make, and mine to be wrong about." "The bond is gone anyway," Harry said. "Yes. So all of that." Harry stopped, started again. "Is there anything left? From my mother?" "Yes," Dumbledore said. "The thing I built nothing on top of. Lily's own protection. It cannot be stripped by any waterfall, because it is not an external charm. It lives in your blood. It is why, if Quirrell touches you, it will burn him." Harry looked at him. "So he's been here all year, and he couldn't touch me." He could not. But the bond being gone, the bond shielded more than privet drive, Dumbledore said. It created insulation, a barrier between you and what works against you that did more than prevent physical attack at one address. Without it, the protections are thinner. The margin is smaller. And the connection between your scar and Voldemort's presence operates without mediation, which is why you have been feeling it more acutely than you should have at this stage. Harry heard this, and felt the year click into alignment. The scar pain rising in October, the 4 months of testing, the directional signal he'd been following through classrooms and corridors without quite knowing how to name what he was measuring. "I used it," he said. "The scar, as information." "I know," Dumbledore said. "Severus told me." Harry absorbed this. "Is it Quirrell?" he said. "Is it Quirrell who's after the stone?" Dumbledore's expression did something complicated. "What makes you ask?" Harry had been building to this for 4 months, and was done with building. "The scar. It responds to Quirrell specifically, every time he's in the room. More when he faces me. Nothing near Snape. I've been testing it since October. And in February, I followed Snape into a corridor, under my cloak, and watched him corner Quirrell. My scar hurt near Quirrell the whole time. Not near Snape. Snape was warning him away from something. You have been very thorough, Dumbledore." Dumbledore said, quietly, "You have. Am I right?" A pause. Then, "Yes, the stone is in danger, and the person who wants it has been in this school since September." Harry nodded. He had known. Having it confirmed was not relief. It was something simpler. The weight had been shared. "The trapdoor on the 3rd floor," Harry said. "I know some of what's down there. Hermione's been researching for months. I know about the dog. I know there are other protections below it." "Harry, I'm not going in," Harry said. "Not tonight. Not unless something happens that makes it necessary. But I know what's down there, and I know who wants it, and I thought you should know that I know." Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. "All right," he said. He said it as if he meant all of it. The information, the fact that Harry had gathered it, the agreement that it was information Dumbledore needed to have. Then, "I am going to try something. I am going to tell you a thing I would previously have decided not to tell you, because I have been deciding what not to tell you for a long time, and I think the results have been mixed." He paused. "In the absence of the bond of blood, I have spent this year reinforcing Hogwarts's own enchantments, the castle's protections, which exist independent of anything I specifically arranged. You are inside them. You are not alone inside them. Severus watches Quirrell. I watch Quirrell. The protections below the trapdoor were designed with specific intention." "Snape doesn't like me," Harry said. "That is not the same as not protecting you." Harry considered this. He thought about Snape's voice in the corridor, low, precise, implacable. He thought about 4 months of reports sent north that Snape had never once mentioned to Harry directly. "I know," Harry said. He did not say, "I know, and I'm not sure what to do with it yet." He said, "I won't go into the corridor, not unless I have to. That is all I ask." Dumbledore said it quietly. What he did not say was audible underneath it. "And that may not be enough. And I know it. And I am proceeding on the only thing I have left, which is trust." Harry stood. He moved toward the door and then stopped. "Did you know her well?" "My mother?" "Yes," Dumbledore said. "Very well. Was she What was she like? She understood, Dumbledore said, that the decisions made in the moments that matter are the ones that define a person. Not decisions made when it costs nothing, the ones that cost everything. A pause. You are more like her than you know. Harry went out. He stood in the corridor for a moment, in the quiet of a late April evening, and thought about his mother, knowing exactly what she was doing, and doing it anyway, and about the difference between being kept safe in ignorance and being trusted with the truth of your own situation. It was not easy. He thought it was better. He walked back toward Gryffindor Tower in the settling dark of the castle, and let the year assemble itself clearly, at last, around what he now actually knew. The news arrived at dinner in the form of Professor McGonagall, moving through the great hall with her particular bearing of someone who has contained something and intends to keep containing it. She reached Harry and said, quietly, that Dumbledore had been called to the Ministry on urgent business, and had left that afternoon. She said it was not a matter for students. She said he would return when the Ministry was satisfied. Harry thanked her. He watched her move back toward the staff table. He looked at the empty chair at the high table where Dumbledore usually sat. He looked at the staff table's far end, where Quirrell was cutting his food into small pieces with meticulous care, and not looking up. Harry set down his fork. Under the table, his hand found Ron's arm. Ron looked at him. Harry looked at Hermione. Neither of them needed it explained. They went to get the cloak. The third-floor corridor at midnight had the particular silence of a place that knows it shouldn't be visited. Harry had been here before, had stood outside this door in September with the cloak bundled under his arm and thought, later. Not now. Now was now. He unlocked the door and they went in, and the smell hit immediately, animal and warm, and the particular sharpness of something large and not entirely clean. 3 heads swung toward them from the darkness. Fluffy was enormous. 3 necks, 3 massive heads, 3 sets of eyes finding them in the dark. The heads moved independently, each tracking at a different angle, the trapdoor pinned under one enormous paw. Hermione had brought a small wooden flute. She played it. Her playing was not musical in any particular sense. It was functional, competent, the playing of someone who had learned quickly for a purpose rather than for pleasure. But it was enough. 1 head dropped first, then the second, and then the third went heavy and slow, and the sound of 3 sets of breathing deepened into something that was almost like peace. They moved fast. Harry found the iron ring set into the trap-door beneath Fluffy's paw and wrenched it open. The darkness below was complete. "On 3, he said. "On 3, Hermione said. Ron said, "Brilliant plan." He went in first. Harry went second, and Hermione pulled the trap-door shut above her and came third, and for a moment there was nothing but the dark and the rushing air. And then something cold and living and fast caught Harry's arms and legs, and pulled. Devil's snare. He knew it from Hermione's notes. Plant that killed by strangulation, recoiled from light and fire, and he made himself go still, because struggling made it tighten, which was not an instinct that came easily. And in the dark he could hear Ron making the same discovery at speed. "Don't move," Harry said. "Don't fight it." Hermione said something short, and there was light. Bluebell fire, cold and blue, blooming out from her palm, and the plant recoiled, fast and total, and the 3 of them dropped through into the chamber below and landed hard on the stone floor. Harry was on his hands and knees for a moment, checking that all his parts still worked in the expected directions. They did. He got up. He helped Ron up. Hermione was already on her feet, the fire extinguished, looking ahead into the chamber. The next room held the sound before they saw the source. A faint rushing of wings, coming from every wall, When Harry raised the lantern they'd brought, Hermione had packed for this, which Harry had stopped being surprised by in October. The chamber clarified. Hundreds of keys, winged or silver, darting through the air in tight arcs, too fast to follow individually, but filling the space like living confetti. 3 broomsticks leaned against the far wall beside a locked door. "Harry," Ron said. Harry was already crossing to the brooms. He had been playing Seeker since September. He mounted the broom and kicked off and went after the one that mattered. The old one with a bent wing, flying slightly off pattern, distinguishable from the rest by the small gap it left in the formation around it. He caught it on the 4th pass and was back on the ground in less than 2 minutes. The door opened. The sound in the next chamber came through the door before they were fully through it. The click and scrape of massive stone pieces on a stone board. The chess set stood from wall to wall, black and white squares 20 feet across, pieces taller than any of them. A door on the far side. Ron stood at the edge of the board for a long moment, looking at the pieces with the focused stillness Harry recognized from every game they'd played in the common room. "We take the empty pieces places," Ron said. "Harry, you're a bishop. Hermione. Castle, left side. I'm the knight." They moved. Stone ground on stone. The black pieces responded. A rook on the opposite side was taken and shattered against the wall. Harry moved when Ron said, "Where Ron said," and Ron directed the rest of the board with the particular confidence of someone who has played chess long enough to stop fearing the loss of individual pieces. Then Ron moved his knight to a square Harry could see was going to get it taken. "Ron, when my piece is taken, we'll have the board." He looked across at the Black Queen, already repositioning. "Stay where you are, both of you." "It's chess," Ron said. "You have to lose pieces to win." The Black Queen crossed the board, and Ron went sideways hard and hit the stone floor and didn't get up. The Black King threw down its crown. The pieces cleared. Harry was across the board at a run. Ron was breathing, face pale, eyes shut, a darkening mark at his temple. Harry knelt and said his name, and Ron did not respond, but the pulse was there when Harry pressed 2 fingers to his wrist. Hermione crouched on the other side. Her expression had compressed whatever she was feeling into something close to steady. "He needs more help than we can give him here," she said. "I should go back, through the plant, through the dog. I can do it, and find someone who can reach Dumbledore." She looked at the door on the far side of the board. "You have to keep going," Harry said. "Go, be fast." She went, through the cleared pieces and through the door they'd come in, and was gone. Harry stood up. He looked at the door on the far side. He went through. The troll was already down, sprawled on the stone floor of the next chamber, with the boneless look of something unconscious, a club dropped beside it, ropes of restraint around its ankles that someone had tied with evident haste and force. Harry stepped past it, and did not look at it twice, and went through the next door. The room beyond was cold, and held 2 flames, one purple, one black, at each end, and between them a table with 7 bottles arranged in a line. The purple flame had come up behind him when he entered, and cut off the way back. The black flame ahead cut off the way forward. On the table beside the bottles was a rolled scroll. He read what the puzzle said. 7 bottles. 3 were poison. 2 were nettle wine. 1 would carry him backward through the black flame. 1 would carry him forward. The poem on the scroll gave him the logic to deduce which was which size bottles appeared where in what proportion, and Harry read it through twice and then looked at the bottles and worked through the deduction in order. This size appears 3 times, which means danger. This smallest bottle stood at the end, which means safe passage forward. The second from the right carries him back. He picked up the smallest bottle. Barely a mouthful. He held it for a moment in the cold air and thought about the mirror ahead. He had been here before, in December, had stood in front of it and seen his parents in the glass. He thought about Quirrell, who had been trying to reach what was behind it all year, and who had finally, tonight, with Dumbledore gone, made his move. He drank the bottle. Cold went through him, not like water, like something that reorganized the air. He walked into the black flame and through it. The chamber on the other side was dark, except for the mirror. The mirror of Erised stood where he had left it in December. Gilded frame, inscription running around the edge, glass that caught the light that had no clear source. Harry's eyes went to it immediately, by reflex, then away, to the shape standing in front of it, a slight figure in a purple turban that had come slightly unwound at one corner, with its back to Harry, its head tilted up toward the glass. Quirrell turned around. His face, when Harry saw it, was calmer than it had ever been in a classroom. The stutter was entirely absent. He looked at Harry with an expression that was not hurried and not afraid, the expression of someone who had made a decision and arrived at its consequence and was not surprised to find Harry here, only mildly inconvenienced. "I wondered," Quirrell said, "when you would come." Quirrell turned from the mirror with the unhurried quality of someone who has been expecting a knock at the door. "I wondered when you would come," he said. The stutter was gone, completely, cleanly absent, the way a held breath is let go when you stop needing to pretend. His voice without it was calm and precise, and had the particular steadiness of a person who has stopped performing. He was watching Harry with an expression that was almost pleasant, the expression of someone who has decided the situation is under control and sees no reason to indicate otherwise. Harry's scar erupted. Not the background throb of a data lesson, not the directional ache he'd been calibrating for 8 months. This was immediate and total, a pain that went from forehead to spine, that bent his vision for a moment at the edges, that he had to stand into rather than away from, pressing his teeth together and his feet into the floor. Quirrell was 6 feet away. The room had no buffer between them, no corridor, no distance, no 50 other students absorbing the space. Just stone and firelight and the mirror standing in the dark, and the scar screaming the same thing it had been saying since September, which was, "Here, here, this is the source." "You've been watching me all year," Quirrell said. He said it conversationally. "I noticed. You were less subtle than you believed. But then you are 11, so I am willing to make allowances." "What have you done with the stone?" Harry said. "That," Quirrell said, "is the problem I am currently solving." He turned back to the mirror. "This particular security measure is more sophisticated than I anticipated. It shows me the stone, gives me the clear impression of having it, and then my hand closes on air." He tilted his head, studying the glass. "I suspect it requires a very specific kind of wanting. Someone who wants to find it, but not use it." He turned back to Harry. "Look into it." Harry looked. The mirror showed him his own face first, just him, lit from somewhere the chamber wasn't, looking back at himself from an angle that felt slightly too forward, too present. Then something changed. A familiar weight settled into his right trouser pocket. He felt it arrive, real, physical, actually there, and kept his face perfectly still. In the glass, he could see himself reaching into his pocket and closing his hand around something small and smooth. He did not actually do this. He kept both hands at his sides and thought, "The mirror just gave me the stone. Dumbledore's mechanism worked. I want to find it. I don't want to use it. The stone is in my pocket right now." "Well?" Quirrell said. "I see myself winning the Quidditch House Cup," Harry said. Quirrell looked at him for a moment. His expression did not change immediately. Then something came over it, a flatness, very brief, and he said, "You are lying. I'm not. The mirror would not show you Quidditch." Quirrell moved toward him, and Harry did not step back, because stepping back was not an option, and he had already understood this. "Tell me what you saw." "Quidditch," Harry said. "Trophy. Gryffindor." Quirrell stopped 2 feet away. Harry's scar was a sustained white noise of pain. "It doesn't matter," Quirrell said. "If the mirror gave it to you, I will simply retrieve it from you." But he didn't reach out. He knew, or suspected, that something was wrong with touching Harry, had learned this in September, and stood close and didn't close the distance, and his expression was careful. "Use the boy," said a voice. Harry had never heard this voice before. It came from behind Quirrell and above him, from a direction that should have been only Quirrell's back, and it was low and thin and had the quality of cold things, the quality of a draught through a stone wall in January, a quality of something very patient that has been patient for so long that patience and hunger have become the same thing. Quirrell turned, half turning, the way someone turns toward a voice that lives directly behind their eyes. The purple turban unwound. It fell in loops from his head, and his hair was beneath it, lank and dark, and then the back of his head was visible and Harry saw the face. It looked wrong in the way that faces on the backs of heads always look wrong. Inverted proportions, the features where they shouldn't be, but it was also distinctly, specifically, deliberately, a face, pale and red-eyed, with the kind of expression that is not so much looking at you as measuring you. It had no nose. Its eyes were scarlet. "Harry Potter," said the face. The voice came from it directly. "Look at you. 11 years old and come to stop me." Harry did not say anything. "I want to tell you something," the face said. "Last summer, in those tunnels when the bank's waterfall activated, I felt the old man's charm leave you. 10 years of careful work, washed away in half a second. I thought, the boy is finally exposed. Now I can act." Harry's scar was a constant. He stood in it. "But then my host tried to touch you," the voice said. "September. He moved toward you in the corridor and pulled back, because his hands were burning." The red eyes moved across Harry's face, without hurry. "A bond of blood protects a location. It does not burn hands. So something else is protecting you. Something older. Something the waterfall could not reach." Harry looked at the face and thought about Dumbledore in April. "She chose to die. It lives in your blood. The waterfall cannot strip it." "Your mother," the voice said. "Not a question. She chose to die for you. Freely, I understand that. But what she created in that choosing is not something I have a name for. I want to know what it is." A pause. "I will. Eventually." "You can't have the stone," Harry said. "The stone is temporary," the voice said. "What I want is the answer to a question that you are, at this moment, embodying. Take him." Quirrell's hands came up and closed on Harry's throat. The burning started. Not slow, not building. Immediate, the way something too hot to touch makes itself known without gradation. Quirrell's hands closed on Harry's throat, and Quirrell recoiled at once, but Harry grabbed his wrists and held on. The logic was simple. Quirrell's hands on Harry's skin were burning Quirrell. The pain Harry felt was his scar, agony, white-edged, but the burning was moving the other way, into Quirrell, and would stop if Harry let go. So Harry did not let go, Quirrell screamed, not the cold voice from the turban that had gone silent, but his own voice, higher and human, the voice of someone whose hands were being destroyed. Harry held the wrists. The scar was agony. Quirrell's strength was enormous, and then it was going, converted into the burning. The screaming continued, and then Quirrell went down and Harry went with him, and Quirrell's body went wrong in the way that bodies do not recover from, and Harry let go. He was on his hands and knees on the stone floor beside the mirror. Something rushed through the air above him. Not wind. Something colder and without mass, moving from where Quirrell lay through the door and out. Harry felt it pass over the back of his neck. It did not burn him. It left nothing behind. Then only his own breathing. He sat back on the stone floor. The stone was in his pocket. Still there, he could feel its weight. His scar had stopped hurting. Not dimmed, not lessened. Stopped, completely, the way sound stops when you close a door. The absence was almost more disorienting than the pain had been. He pressed his palm to his forehead and found only skin. Quirrell was still beside him, not moving, not breathing in the way that Harry was breathing. Harry looked at him for a long moment and did not look away, because looking away felt like a thing he didn't have the right to do. He thought about what the red-eyed face had said. Your mother did something I had not thought possible. He thought, yes, she did. He did not know how long he sat on the stone floor. He knew Hermione had gone for help. He knew Dumbledore would come. He lay down on the cold stone and stared at the ceiling and waited for footsteps from the other side of the door. His scar didn't hurt. He kept checking, pressing 2 fingers to his forehead. And it wasn't there. The absence was almost as disorienting as the pain had been. It felt like the space the bond of blood had left, stripped bare, quiet, a room that had been emptied and was now waiting for something new. He closed his eyes. He waited. He thought about what the red-eyed face had said. Your mother did something I had not thought possible. He thought, yes, she did. And whatever comes next, I know what it was. He thought that was worth knowing. Even here, in the cold and the dark, with Quirrell still beside him, and the stone in his pocket, and the sound of his own breathing, the only sound, it was worth knowing. He woke to light, the particular flat white of a room where the curtains diffuse morning rather than block it, and to the sound of someone breathing steadily in a bed close by, and to the absence of his scar. That was the first thing his mind found, when it found anything, the scar's silence. 8 months of his life had been organized around that signal. Its directionality, its variations, the way it was different near Snape and near Quirrell, and the difference had been crucial. And now it was simply gone. Not muted. Not lessened. Absent. The way something is absent when it has finished. He pressed 2 fingers to his forehead and found only skin, and lay there for a moment in the morning light and let himself not know what to do with that. Dumbledore was in the chair beside his bed. He was sitting with his hands folded in his lap and his half-moon spectacles resting at a slight angle on his crooked nose, and his blue eyes watching Harry with an expression that had a number of things in it, and was making no effort to hide them. He looked tired. He looked like someone who had arrived somewhere after a long journey and was still deciding how he felt about what he'd found when he got there. "Good morning," Dumbledore said. Harry pushed himself up against the pillow. In the adjacent bed, Ron was sleeping with his mouth slightly open and a white bandage around his head. And 2 beds further down, Hermione was asleep with her bushy hair spread across the pillow and her hands folded on the blanket in the precise and slightly defensive arrangement of someone who falls asleep in libraries. She had brought Dumbledore in time. Harry thought about her going back through the chessboard, through the devil's snare, through Fluffy and the corridor and the school, finding whoever needed to be found. She had done all of it correctly and at speed, which was completely unsurprising, and also the reason he was awake right now. "Quirrell," Harry said. "Is dead," Dumbledore said. He said it plainly, without preface. "Yes. And the stone. The stone is safe. It will be destroyed." He paused. Nicholas Flamel and his wife, Perenelle, had sufficient elixir stored to set their affairs in order. They will die, in consequence of the stone's destruction, as they have always known they would when the time came. Nicholas was very old, Harry, and he knew this would end eventually. He was not unprepared. Harry looked at the ceiling. He thought about 665 years of one life and the end of it, and found he didn't have the right size container for the thought. He set it aside. "What did Voldemort say to you?" he said. "When you arrived?" Dumbledore's expression shifted slightly. "He said nothing to me. He was gone before I reached the chamber." A pause. "I saw the mirror. I saw Quirrell. I read the room." He looked at Harry over his spectacles. "I know what he said to you. I found it written in the evidence, and the stone in your pocket confirmed the mechanism." Harry said, "He knew the bond was gone. He said he felt it leave in July. He thought that meant I was finally unprotected. And then Quirrell couldn't touch me, and he realized the bond wasn't the thing that had mattered." "Yes," Dumbledore said. "He will spend the coming years working toward understanding what your mother did. He will approach it from the direction of power, because that is how his mind works. He will not immediately understand that what made it work was the opposite of power." He folded his hands. "But he knows now that there is something to understand." "That is new information," Harry said. "Is that dangerous?" "It was already dangerous," Dumbledore said. "The difference is that before July, he was testing a wall without knowing what kind of wall it was. Now he knows it is not a charm, not external, not broken by the waterfall. That shapes what he tries next." He paused. "When he has a body to try things with." They sat with that for a moment. The hospital wing was quiet. Someone's shoes clicked past in the corridor beyond. Harry said, "Where do I go this summer?" Dumbledore looked at him for a moment before answering, in the way he had started doing since April, the way that meant he was choosing to answer honestly rather than strategically. "That is a question I have been working on since July," he said. "The answer I have arrived at is, here, Hogwarts through August. The castle will be your home for as long as it needs to be." "That's not a permanent answer." "No," Dumbledore said. "I am aware. I am still working on the permanent version." A pause. "What I can tell you is that I am working on it, and that I will tell you what I find, rather than presenting you with an arrangement already decided." Harry looked at him. He thought about September, arriving at Hogwarts for the first time, and feeling the thing that had been stretched thin since July settle. Not resolved, but settled. The feeling of having found something he hadn't known he was looking for. He thought about the mirror in December and what it showed him. He thought about a conversation in Dumbledore's study in April, where someone had told him the truth about his own life. "All right," Harry said. "That's honest." "I am trying," Dumbledore said, "to make honesty a habit where you are concerned." Harry looked at him for a moment, and then nodded. Once, short. That was all, and it was enough. Ron woke while Dumbledore was gone to speak with Madame Pomfrey, the hospital wing's matron, about when her patients would be ready to leave. He came awake with a considerable amount of noise and a brief and startled expression, followed by a rapid survey of his surroundings. And then he said, "Did we?" Yes, Harry said. Is the stone safe? Ron let out a long breath and lay back against the pillow and looked at the ceiling in the manner of someone conducting a private inventory of relief. The Queen piece, he said, came out of nowhere. I knew she was going to take me. I'd planned for it, and she still came out of nowhere. That is the thing about the Queen piece. It was the right move, Harry said. It was the only move, Ron said. There's a difference. But something in his face said he didn't entirely believe the distinction, and he was quietly pleased that it had worked. Hermione woke 15 minutes later, in stages, already composing thoughts on the way up. She looked at Harry. Status? He told her. She listened with the attention she gave to lecture notes, and nodded. Several things follow, she said. Voldemort isn't destroyed, expelled from Quirrell but not gone. He'll need a new host or another path to a body. He's possessed a human being for an entire year, which means he knows the approach works. And the stone is being destroyed, which means he's lost this path to immortality and will need another one. Ron looked at her. He looked at Harry. Could we hold all of that? He said. After breakfast? Harry laughed, genuine and unguarded, the first clean laugh of the chapter, and Ron grinned at the sound of it, satisfied, and Hermione's expression moved from analysis into something warmer. After breakfast, she said. But we should hold it. Severus Snape stood outside the hospital wing and did not go in. He knew the boy was all right. Madame Pomfrey had told him. Alive, recovering, no permanent damage. He had nodded and remained where he was. He stood in the corridor and thought about a girl he had known once who had the same eyes as the boy in the bed beyond those doors. Not like his eyes. Not similar. The same, exactly. Transplanted into a face that was otherwise entirely his father's. He had spent 10 years deciding he would manage whatever he felt when those eyes appeared in front of him, and managing it had been harder than expected, and easier than feared, and the boy had turned out to be, in the ways that mattered, which were not the most visible ways, largely his mother's. He thought about what it cost to watch over someone from a distance, in silence, without acknowledgement. He knew the cost. He had been paying it for 10 years and would continue. He was not sad about this precisely. Not only sad. There was something else in it, a quality to this particular morning that was different from the others, the sense that the watching, this year, had been worth something concrete. That the boy had gone in and come back out, and the thing that kept him coming back out was something that had been there all along, beneath everything that had been placed above it and stripped away. He turned from the door and walked back down the corridor.